we're excited about the release of the Texas Institute of Letters announcement of the literary award that went to Marisol for her Sergio Troncoso Award for Best First Book of Fiction for her new release, Loose at Midnight. I'm so excited for her again. Loose at Midnight tells a story of universal love and the ill-timed love affair with surrounded by the climate change politics and environmental injustice uniquely unfolding in South Texas. And if you were in South Texas or anywhere in Texas this month, then you know what we're talking about, right? And it was just like amazing, right? You're for anybody who was actually reading the book during the time it was happening too, I could just imagine what they were thinking, right. So again, thank you. This book is for all communities who struggle to protect places and people in a time of multiple crises, and it stands on the shoulders of all literary and literal antepasados who blaze a trail for us, is something you said, which is, it's so true. And so I'm honored to be your publisher and friend. And without further ado, Marisol Cortez, how about you take over and you
Yeah,
know
I
grace us with Loose at Midnight.
thank you so much, Edward. I really appreciate it. I know everybody is coming from a lot of different kinds of stressful situations right now at home. We just went through a lot of stress as a region. So I really appreciate everybody taking the time on a Friday night to be here for this reading. I'm super excited to read to you and for you. Thank you, Edward from FlowerSong. Thank you, Joe, who's working tech behind the scenes and really making this like actually physically possible for us to be together. Thank you to everybody who's read the book and offered your congratulations and your support. And thank you to the Texas Institute of Letters. We just got that announcement a couple days ago, and I'm still I'm still just kind of reeling from it and processing it. Thank you to Sergio Troncoso in particular. He funded that particular award that's named after him. And thank you to my family. Thank you to my ancestors. Thank you to the land that we live on, which is the traditional homelands of the Ashtokana and many other tribal communities and kinship networks whose descendants are still here, living here. I'll be reading tonight from the book, but I'm also excited to kind of give you the story of the book illuminated from behind, by highlighting a few folks that were really instrumental in bringing the book into the world. We think of writing as a solitary thing, but it always occurs in this ecology of relationships, right? So its public facing moments are made possible by all of these people kind of standing behind the person that wrote this or that. And so I want to honor that embeddedness tonight and also give you a deeper sense of the themes of the book and the stakes of the book through dialogue with folks that kind of know it most intimately. And so tonight what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with one excerpt, and then I'll introduce the guest artists who are here and talk a little bit about their connection to the book. And then they'll each read a piece that resonates with Luce in some form or fashion. And I kind of left that up to them to figure out how that makes sense for them. And then I'll close by reading another couple excerpts. And then at a couple points in there, we'll have some raffle drawings just because it's fun, and we have some prizes. So to open, I want to read from a part of the book that I think a lot of people, like Edward was saying, really picked up on in recent weeks with the extreme weather that we just went through and the rolling blackouts. And this is an excerpt from a chapter called Lolly Calls the Utility People. On Monday morning, when on the third day without power, they wake to an apartment that won't be roused from a gray-black dawn and a fridge gone warm and silent, Lolly calls City Power and Light a second time. Hector's already gone for the day. Normally, she sleeps through his departure, He wakes at 4:45 to leave at 5:30 for his 6 a.m. telemarketing shift. But this morning it is too hot to sleep without the fans running. Nena splayed on her back in her diaper, with hair plastered to forehead. In the dark, they had whispered about what to do before Hector dressed without showering and hurried off for the day, grabbing a speckled, off-gassing banana on his way out the door. Lali had cleaned her glasses absent-mindedly with her shirt as she thought, wiping their greasy lenses in tortoiseshell frames before shoving them back up the bridge of her nose. She'd call again. It was the only thing she could do at 5:30 in the morning. The utility people staff their customer service centers 24/7, the vultures. Gotta make that money. Yesterday, the man on the phone sounded merely harried, but today he sounds harried and surprised and bored all at once. Who could blame him? It's probably the end of his graveyard shift, stuffed into a cubicle in a big, airless, windowless room where it doesn't matter if it's night or day, like Hector at his job. The utility staffer tells Lali the power should have been restored to her neighborhood by now. They're working on it as quickly as they can. Sometimes it takes a while. It should be any time now. They are recommending that customers without power seek shelter during the hot hours of the day with friends or relatives who might also share refrigerator space so customer perishables don't perish. Too late for that. She thinks of the anaerobic pot of beans they fed to the compost the day before, the frozen geometries of vegetable medley melted into mush, the wick cheese misshapen and sweating in its plastic wrap. They'd spent the hot parts of Saturday and Sunday moving around the city, from swimming pool to library to mall, public places where they could linger without having to buy anything, not returning to the apartment until sundown. Each time hoping they would come home to fans and lights. Now it is Monday, so at least they have other places to be, in other parts of the city. Glasses on, plain, straight hair passably combed and tucked behind her ears. Lali rouses Nena early so she can drop her off at daycare before the sun is too high, squeezing a breast against her mouth before she has time to complain about interrupted sleep. Some mornings they fight and scuffle all morning like cats, breast to clothes to car to school, Nena lunging and Lali retreating and vice versa. But this morning, Nena unlatches, calm and wakeful. Sometimes, gazing down at her child, Lali still cannot believe Nena emerged, healthy and whole, from the salvaged wreck of her body. She bows inward thanks to corporeal elasticity and the blessing of calm children and the Gulf wind that blows them uneventfully to the lab school on the community college campus, where 10 little faces encircling a tiny table look up from their cereal bowls when they enter the toddler room together. Amazingly, Nena sits and eats without protest. She never just sits and eats. From Nena's school, it is just a few blocks to El Centro, slumping in its repurposed complex of offices, its outer walls colorfully muraled. When she first started working there, Victor had guided her through the maze of offices, papered with banners and posters, pointing out which rooms had been the offices of the first Black lawyer in the city, which had belonged to a dentist before that. And below was a barber shop where old men still congregated. And next door, Centro had big plans for a magnificently falling apart, boarded up structure that once housed a plumbing supply company. Stacked inside, even still, were pyramids of ceramic sewer mains. On Victor's heels, Lali had studied the posters and flyers thumbtacked to the walls. One poster she'd seen before depicted an open-mouthed big fish chasing a scared little fish, then a swarm of little fish in the shape of a bigger fish turning around to chase their would-be predator. Organize, it read. And I'm gonna skip a couple of paragraphs ahead. It kind of describes how she starts her day when she gets to work. She likes to start by looking at the newspapers just to see what's going on in the city. And so we're gonna drop in there. Today, she's looking for news of the refinery explosion that she heard on the radio right before she saw it for herself, like a premonition. But the big paper says explanations are pending investigation. And even this is buried beneath exclamatory news about the storm, the storm. In a city that has sucked itself dry, the fact of rain makes front page. how many houses lost power in which neighborhoods, and how many car engines died when their drivers attempted to ford low water crossings, and a picture of some wiseacre vato in sunglasses tubing down the street in the rain with a can of beer in his hand. 30 years after all those famous utility sit-ins organized by an alliance of inner-city neighborhood associations led mostly by seniors, hence the name Vamos, viejos against more of the same, it was still the West Side whose streets flooded, still the West Side that lost power. Then there is the press statement of the utility people about restoring power, so vague as to be void of content. In El Bilingue, she reads a story. She covers the English copy with her hand to slog through the Spanish for practice. It was as slow going and strenuous as hacking one's way through waist-high grass with a machete. About an elderly couple, not far from Lali's apartment, who had been found suffocating in their tiny shotgun house. Utility workers discovered them as they made their rounds to the burned out neighborhoods, fixing transmission towers and testing transformers. The woman who came to the door was 86, the sole caretaker of an 87-year-old husband with emphysema. Are your lights back on? Fridge, air? The workers had gone from house to house asking, in Spanish or English or Spanglish as required. The tiny stooped woman at the door in her house dress explained that, yes, the lights, but they didn't have no air or heat. The wiring in the house made it dangerous to run the little window unit in the living room. And many years ago, when they moved in, the utility people told them the gas leaked so bad they wouldn't turn on services for them, said it was a liability issue or something. So in the long summer of March till November, they set up a chain of box fans to cool the house, while in the winter, they plugged a hot plate into the outlet next to their bed and used the electric coils to heat the room, like a space heater. The house, you could see it was small, so it worked well enough. But when the power went out after the storm over the weekend, they lost not only the fans, but also the oxygen equipment her husband needed to breathe. The workers found him gasping at the back of the house, reclining in a chair pushed against an open window. He stabilized at the hospital, but not before another case surfaced, this one on the east side, this one fatal. Vamos had called an emergency meeting at the West Side Senior Center. El Bilingue concludes, todos están invitados. She should go. Chela, too. Where was she? This was exactly what Vamos had said would happen if the city raised electric rates like they'd voted to do. And now it had happened, and the increase hadn't even kicked in yet. And I'm going to skip again a couple paragraphs to where she finally locates Chela. She finds Chela outside, prepping a bed in her rubber boots and work gloves, sweaty hair held back by blue bandana. If it was hot when they woke at the butt crack of dawn, now at 5 till 9, it's even hotter, overcast and sticky. Leaning on her shovel, Chela rights herself when she sees Lali coming, passing a gloved arm across her forehead and smiling. Hey, mujer, what's going on? With the men, the conventional greeting Lali learned on her first visit to Centro was to take turns slapping hands down low and then bumping fists. There was always a moment of panicked humiliation or hilarity in it for Lali, a scrambling to strike an authenticity she did not feel. It was supposed to look natural, but it felt absurd, scripted. But with Chela, it is good and right to hug and kiss each other on the cheek. Look at this article I just read. She pushes the bilingual paper at Chela. Chela scans it and looks up, eyes wide. What the? Yeah, Lali says, as Chela continues to read. The one on the east side is super close by. That boarding house a few streets down? Chela closes her eyes, scanning a mental geography. Hijo, that's right. Lowering the paper, she slaps at a mosquito on her arm. Vamos called it, she murmured. Damn, this stuff just keeps piling up. All the shit hitting all the fans. Like, did you hear about the explosion at that jankety old refinery on the river? The one they closed a couple years back that they're trying to turn into apartments now? So apparently a construction crew accidentally severed an old gas pipeline and hands blooming before her in illustration, she mimics the sound of combustion like a kid smashing toy trucks together. Yeah, says Lali. I actually saw the smoke on Friday when I was coming back from the bank. And then later that night was that crazy thunderstorm. Did y'all lose power over at your place? The electricity? No. Loca, we live on the north side, remember? Well, the north side of downtown. They laugh. But we got hail the size of golf balls, Chela says, and one of the trees in the front had a limb crack off. Poor Ramona was going apeshit, scrambling from one room to the other, trying to dig up the floors. I had to bring her under the covers with me, chiflada. When I left for work this morning, says Lali, the power was still out at my place. Fucking city power and light, says Chela. They should change their name to shitty power and light. For real. Chela pauses, reflecting. You know what, though? We complain when things start breaking down, but it's like a monster we've been feeding this whole time. We only thought we had it chained. All right. So thank you for listening to that. And what I wanted to do now was bring in some of the guest readers who I'm really excited to have here. I wanted to start with Mobi Warren. Mobi once, a while back, described herself to me as a polymath, which is a beautiful word that I love. That basically means she wears multiple hats. She's a poet, she's an author, she's a retired math teacher, she's a runner, she's a citizen scientist, she is a pollinator protector, she is a puppet artist and a storyteller and a climate change activist. And I met her in that latter capacity when I was doing the community work around climate justice that kind of like informs the book. And then later I got to know her as a writer via a group that she co-founded with Jim LaVilla Haviland called Stone in the Stream, Roca en el Rio Environmental Writers and Artists Group. I started attending meetings of that group kind of like before I had much of an idea that I might do something with the manuscript that I was working on. But it was really through that writing community and the encouragement of Mobi and Jim and Kamala and everybody in that group that that I started to call myself a writer and really to claim that and to call this book a novel. And so Mobi is somebody who created the community that was necessary and that I didn't know was necessary to take my own writing seriously and to try to do something with it beyond just finishing it and putting it away like everything else I had done. And so I thank her for that, and I only hope that I can follow in that example and support other folks the way that she and others have supported me. So Mobi.
Can you hear me? So I am incredibly honored to have been asked by Marisol to share with you. I really think Marisol possesses a very singular genius, both as a writer and as a human being. And I'm really looking forward to seeing continued incredible work from Marisol that enriches all of us and really renews the possibility for community and for health in our world. So I selected one poem to read that Marisol told me a couple years ago or more ago was one of her favorite poems of mine. And I think you'll see its connection to Luz as I read it. The poem is called Fracking the Eagle Ford. In a dream, I held 4 pebbles in my mouth to slake thirst during a 100-year drought. 4 words, syllables of the sacred. I awoke singing hymen, hymenoptera, foramen, foraminifera, and wanted to dance a circle over the Eagle Ford shale to cleanse what we have done. Children born in a time of shattered rock and the reckless burn of carbon, forgive us. Hymen, we force water, giver of life, into a weapon to sunder the mother's hidden membranes. We plunder glittering fossil beds, foraminifera, the ancient reefs beneath our feet. We are grave robbers who burn cradles. We forsake the wild bees, Hymenoptera, community-minded insects whose dance of take is also a dance of give back. We erase their courtship of horsemen and paintbrush, star-faced flocks, flowers powered by the sun, whose spidery roots find paths through rock by becoming one with it. Foramen, for the children, amen. Hold a newborn in your arms. Place a light hand over the pulse at the crest of her skull, the soft spot where hint of sea still murmurs, child swathed in wonder. She cries for clear water, unmolested land, untainted air.
I love that, Mobi. It always makes me tear up when I hear that poem, and so much of your work does too. Like really moves me a lot. So thank you so much for
Thank you.
sharing that. The next reader that I wanted to invite is Kamala Platt, and like Mobi, Kamala also straddles a lot of different worlds: artistic, activist, and academic or scholarly kind of ways of knowing and thinking and doing. She is a poet and an author with 2 collections published: Weeds Lovers, 10 Years in the Shadow of September, and On the Line. Those are 2. I made them sound like 1, but they're actually 2. And then plus a third in the works called Gravity Prevails. She is an educator. She teaches creative writing, ethnic literature, and environmental justice poetics online in the Humanities, Arts, and Cultural Studies Department at Arizona State University's New College. And she's also a dedicated tender of native landscapes on the west side of San Antonio and in Kansas and in all of the places I would imagine that she has inhabited. And in all of this work, she, in her own words, embodies the poetics of both crisis and resistance, chronicling calamities, but also the persistence of hopeful acts in marginalized parts of our region and planet. And because our work, our writing work and our community work so often have so many points of intersection, Kamala was one of the first people that I told that I had a manuscript in my hands that I thought I might want to publish. And how do you go about doing something like that? And later she also lent her professional eye as a writer, as a published author, and as a creative writing instructor in editing the manuscript. And I think it benefited really deeply from the developmental and critiques that she gave me. So I have her to thank for just her theoretical and her poetic brilliance in helping shape that story. So Kamala, where are you?
Sorry, I'm pressing the wrong button to unmute. Thank you, Marisol. And I have to say that I have my mother, Yvonne Platt, who had a small press, Woodsworth, to thank for some of that knowledge. And my dad for a lot of the environmental knowledge. Well, anyway, I just wanted to say that, yes, my students in my Chicano, transporter Chicano literature class were reading the book at the time of the storms here. And some of them were here, some of them were across the country. But very many of them in their discussion then mentioned that the coincidence in marks was something that they remarked upon. Okay, I'm going to read sort of a little poem that I put together from 3 different poems that had to do. I think you'll see some of the connections. It's a San Antonio West Side poem. The first part: Winter of West Side Displacement. As halcyon days begin, Bird Island is denuded. Following city edicts, men in hazmat remove all nests. Audubon volunteers transfer 6 south of town, rewire them into trees on the banks of the recycled sewage waters, where people visit from the north side and other waterfowl abound. We shall not be moved. The song and drum from a climate justice rally at Main Plaza reaches the west side, and egrets flock like a galaxy. Plans are set in place for generations of birds and people to be sent packing. They share decades, neighborhoods, La Paz and El Barrio. Barrio displacement threatens Alazan Apache Los Cortes, built 1937. One sunny afternoon, 2 great egrets venture out on the island's barren ground. They arch wings and dance, rising in rhythm, each with the other, dance to drum beats we cannot hear. Their dance defies the city that denies them roost and nest. They dance a final dance, fly off, follow waters to the Gulf. City of tiny terrors. I want to plant spring seeds, but time has run askew, drained away. The sun has not returned, has been deported. Each morning I wake in anticipation, but sense as I rise, the weather is not right. So instead I pour water in a clay saucer. I feed cats. You say you do not know trust anymore. Neighbors have been detained, deported with the sun. You do not know neighbors. There are no neighbors. There is no one left whom you know. Neighbors have been evicted. They have nowhere now. Their puppies sit in a wire cage, awaiting fate. It doesn't come. We pour water in a tin bowl. We feed dogs. I read the news like all of you. San Antonio is a model for the world, a wonder of globe washing, a new, clean, tricentennial city, a guardian of goodwill on the planet. I scoff. For the world, perhaps, but not for our neighborhood. For the planet, maybe, but not for people like us, not for the animals, not in our time of tiny terrors. Finally, Chato, Brownie, Figueroa, every neighbor had a different name for him. He was a fearless friend, guarded his homegirl Bonnie from the cars in the street when she got hit, kept watch on my porch, but barked only when necessary, saved a wayward hen, stepped in the way of an attacking dog so I could grab the bird. I still remember his quizzical response when a passerby pulled a blade on him. He didn't bark, just sidestepped away from the knife, an utterly unfazed pacifist encountering a party pooper who didn't want to play. And that kind of de-escalation of bad will be sorely missed around here these days. That spirit of pure, friendly optimism, protecting our community, made me literally go to court for him at the risk of $1,200 in fines. And with the presence of kindness and intelligence, we won against odds. After that, we managed to neuter and microchip him. We did not find him a home off Martin Street, though. The city said we could not have a neighborhood dog, but we did. And if he'd lived a couple weeks longer into the stay home, stay safe era, I don't know what we'd done, because he was not a socially distancing dog. He spread goodwill to all and got fed for it. Lately, he had gotten gordito because we were trying to keep him behind the gate, and he couldn't run and roam all day like he loved to do. He was fine with his new collar, but would not take a leash. If you wanted to do something he wasn't sure about, you had to produce food. Free spirit, Chatito, presente, descanse en paz. He was my dog. He was never my dog, but I love him.
Presente. Thank you, Kamala. I didn't realize you're going to read dog poems at like but it makes total sense for those of y'all that have finished the book, you know why. And for those of y'all that haven't read it yet, Loose in the title is a dog. So thank you very much for your readings. I next want to bring on David Zamora Casas. He is well known here in San Antonio as an award-winning multidisciplinary artist. He's a San Antonio native, working in the public forum since 1985 under the pseudonym Nuclear Meltdown. His life practice is a self-aware decision to move forward critical dialogue within topics of humanity, nature, and spirituality. His performance art functions as social commentary which explores identity, gender assumptions, and environmental plunder. And the artist lovingly states that his work is a passionate, conscious act which strives for an inclusive and eco-friendly, empathetic world. David is connected to the book in a couple different ways. I first met him several years ago through my friend Pajara, who's also here somewhere on this Zoom, who is another visual artist very much involved in climate activism here in San Antonio. Both of them show up in the book and play instrumental roles kind of at key moments of the story. So see if you can figure out where. But then the other way that he is connected to the book, just by looking at it, is that he did the beautiful painting that became the cover image of Loose. And I first saw that painting back in 2012 at an exhibition. And when I saw it, I had this immediate, like, visceral response to it. Like, this is the visual incarnation of this story that I'm writing somehow. And when I saw the title, which is Question Everything, it just kind of like sent a chill through me, because I was like, yeah, that it just resonated. And I told myself that if I ever finished the thing that I was working on and managed to get it published, that I would ask David if I could use that painting as the cover. And so that's how that image came to be the cover of the book. And I'm so grateful for that. So I'm wondering, David, if you can just talk more about the painting, the history of it, what it means to you.
Yes. I want to say that it's tengo tanto orgullo. I'm so proud to be part of this group of wonderful women, Mobi, Marisol, Kamala, and Viktoria, who I consider family. You know, it's like familia. I think that when we create art, we are also trying to create community through our words, through our paintings, through our protest. And it's just humbling to be able to participate and contribute to you women who I love and admire and hold in high esteem. So I wanted to say that before I talk about the Question Everything. That it's a beautiful landscape, I have to say so myself, because, you know, it's fabulous. It is stunning. But I think that I took a visceral approach to it, and I thought, well, what would happen if the land could speak? If the land had voice, what stories would it tell? And I think that as children we question everything. Like, we want to know what's going on. I think we lose some of that as we grow older, because, like, none of your business, be quiet, sit down. You know, the things that discourage us from being not necessarily nosy, but wanting to know more than is offered to us. So the book is called Question Everything. And it comes from the idea of personifying land, personifying culture to a voice that would tell that story. I love the title of the book, Loose at Midnight. And I'm reading the book. I haven't found out that Loose was a dog, but I subsumed myself in it because the book has such a beautiful lyrical flow. And I felt like I was in the book. So the book, I mean, it's like, I felt the same way when I was reading Gone with the Wind. You know, like, I became Scarlett O'Hara. But so this book, I feel like it's me. I feel like I'm in love. And I feel like I'm in the luna de miel, the honeymoon of the relationship. And I can't wait to continue and read the book, continue reading it. It's a big old fat book. It's real. I mean, I've got it right here. It's a big old fat book. I love it. the back to the painting, most of my work is rooted in community. It's inspired by family, and it's inspired by building community and not building alliances. I attended the America for the Arts conference here in San Antonio a few years back, and the writer Naomi Shabib Nye said something that I will never forget. She got, I'm not kidding, she almost got a 15-minute long standing ovation. But she referenced the fact that we were all in this to create a sustainable economy, a thriving economy, an artistic economy. And she said that writers had to support painters, painters had to support dancers, dancers had to support actors and writers. And so she tied it in a real nice little bundle. And I think that that's the perspective that I take when I create work, to build community, to bring up topics that people can ask, well, what do you mean by that? Or what does LGBTQ, what does that Q mean? Or, you know, just to create that dialogue. And so I hope to do that with that painting. And so I'm very honored to have you select that piece for the cover of your book.
Yeah, for sure. Can I ask you, David? Because I just realized as you were speaking, I like didn't really know that much even about the painting. Where was there a particular landscape that you were painting or that you had in mind? Is it a particular location, or did it just come out?
South Texas. I love the you know, and it was a combination of trees and yuccas and succulents. But you know, like I've traveled throughout Texas, and I think that our San Antonio Botanical Center is a good example of how the different landscapes throughout Texas. And so I kind of just combined different plants and trees to make a created magical place. It wasn't a set place. They used to, Vincent van Gogh's brother used to say, don't paint from memory, paint from, no, he said, paint from memory, don't paint from the actual thing. Because Vincent van Gogh would always paint what he saw, the fields, his book, his asylum room, whatever. And so his brother told him, paint by memory, paint what you remember. And that book came from memory. Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
I think.
And so I wanted to introduce the last guest artist, who is Viktoria Valenzuela, and or Vic, as we call her. And she is a poet. She is an editor. She's an organizer who's working on her MFA at Our Lady of University. And she also is the mama of 6 children, who was married to the very awesome poet Vincent Cooper. And she's a Zooglassio fellow, Zooglassio fellow, a Macondista. She's the lead organizer for the San Antonio chapter of Women Who Submit, and the organizer of 100,000 Poets for Change, San Antonio. She's been published widely in Puro Chicanx Writers of the 21st Century, Word Gathering. She's in the Zooglassia anthology We Are Not Your Metaphor, in Poetry Bay Online Journal and Mother Magazine. And she has 2 books in progress. One is a chapbook called In Bed, a postpartum romance. And she's also working on a full-length book of poetry that addresses motherhood and Chicana identity as political poetry. I met Vic at a writers' conference here in town a few years ago. She was on a panel about the event that she organizes, 100,000 Poets for Change, which is actually an international event. And then she does the local manifestation of it. And actually, now that I think about it, Edward was on the same panel, I think, as well. And when she heard that I had done a lot of community organizing work, she asked if I would help her organize that year's 100,000 Poets for Change event. And when I heard that she had 3 little ones under the age of, I think at the time, 3, I can't remember if they were under 3 or under 4 at the time. I said, yes, of course, you need help. So so I helped her with the process, and we became friends in the process. Later, when I was sending out the manuscript and researching presses, she asked if I had heard of FlowerSong, and she connected me with Edward. And so I could not have put Loosed out into the world if people like Vic were not so fiercely committed to building literary community for those whose voices often go unheard in publishing. And then that's true of Edward as well. I'm constantly learning from you, Vic, how we can make art, community building, and caregiving work, how we can do that simultaneously, like as one seamless, unified praxis, rather than, my art goes over here and my kids go over here and my activism go over here, right? Like it's all one because our lives are make them one. And so I'm so very grateful and happy that you're here and wanted to
Thank you
invite
so
you to
much. Thank you, Marisol, for having me join this talk. I'm very proud of you. I'm super thrilled to be a part of this reading and all that has been, how it came to be. I remember talking to you about your love story of how you met, your husband, and how beautiful your wedding was. I was very honored to be there, to be a witness. So I've been reading this book, and what I love about it is your poetic images. And maybe that's because I'm a poet, but I can see them. I can see, the explosion happening in the community and how you cared about that. And then the explosion that happened in your personal life of love at first sight, right? So I believe in the praxis of love as social justice, political identity. And so a lot of my poetry is about romance, and in particular Chicana romance, because I identify as Chicana. And we don't read too many love stories that involve Chicanos or, San Antonio or, the West Side and all these things that your book addresses. And so this is a poem that I wrote, and it's a work in progress. And I thought it would be fitting for today to celebrate romance. Uh, the title is, the working title is Slow Love in the South Side, San Antonio, on a rainy morning at the end of the first week of January, a new century. My body is still shimmering purple and brown hues to the beat of rain falling on yesterday's dry leaves, disturbing like a coup on election day. Oh dear, my sex shimmers, and I remember that today is Sunday, the first day of a new week in January, a new century. My pants are balled up under the covers with my nakedness. We made love slowly to the sound of rain falling and the news of domestic terrorists under arrest on a TV in the distance of our home. The fallen juniper leaves have pained us all this time. We are allergic to the pollen, and the rain coming down has eased my suffering this morning. The first day of a new government meant to sunder our nebulous clouds. Firmament brings a good morning after mourning for so long here. Let me gather myself. Thank you.
I love it, Vic. And I realized before you started reading, I was like, oh man, I should have told her to like read a poem about Vinny, like, or like one of your like amazing love poems, right? Because that's the resonance, right, with this book, I think.
Yeah, I
And
see it.
yeah, so I'm
I
so glad
love it.
I'm so glad you read my mind. Thank you so much. So can we have a round of applause for the guest readers? Thank you, thank you. So what I wanted to do next was go back to the novel. I have a couple of readings that I wanted to do. And the first one kind of continues some of the city politics and environmental plots of the first excerpt that I read, but we also get a little foreshadowing of the love story with the meeting of the two main characters. So it's from a chapter called Algo es algo, which means something is something. The only bright spots that winter are the city council sessions where Lali sits in the plush auditorium seating of the council chambers with Chela and Naima. keeping an ear cocked for news of the city's legal entanglements with Sizemar. Sometimes checking email, sometimes listening quietly, sometimes snarking in whispers or taking notes. Something is revealing itself, something is coming into view. Lali has not abandoned the student's habit of traveling everywhere with backpacks slung over one shoulder. And in her bag is a spiral notebook where she collects notes and thoughts, and even poems, notas, she calls them, feeling form emerge from non-form, the shape of an argument rising in relief against the chaos of observation. Something that would explain the how and why of it, shining a light on what they need to do. These moments of clarity appear between long bouts of boredom, although sometimes there are moments of levity too. Once, Chela burst into the meeting late and unknowingly seated herself one row up from Butch Keller of Keller and Keller, the most powerful developer lobbyists in town, and thus the legal representative of Sizemar Explorations LLC. That man gets whatever he wants, Sister Soli had warned Chela long ago. I should know. I ran against his father for mayor. You see him involved, you know something's up. And now, there he was behind unsuspecting Chela. Lali had to rip a ribbon of paper from her spiral and dash a quick note, twisting over the back of her seat to pass it back to Chela. Psst. Did you know Keller, Keller, i.e. KKK, is sitting right behind you? Chela had glanced behind her surreptitiously, pretending to look out the window, then dipped her head to write back. I'll be sure to fart extra hard then. Yeah, it felt good to go to those meetings as gutter punk as possible. Braless and menstruating, dirty, stinky chucks with no socks and flapping soles, legs hairy and armpits funky as hell. Then there was the time the representative of a rare earth trade group, the United Rare Earth Association, lobbied the council in support of domestic rare earth production. Lali and Chela and Naima had passed Lali's notebook between them, furiously scribbling acronyms for a citizens' lobby that might oppose urea. The People's Organization of Ore Opposition, POO. Citizens Against Corrupt Assholes, CACA. Demonstrating intense, agitated resistance without existing alternatives, diarrhea. And then there was the time they played hangman, on a day when they'd been sitting in the council chambers since 9 a.m, waiting for their agenda item to come up. Apparently, it'd been pushed back since Mayor Mike was running late, in that morning on a red eye from a Spurs game in Mexico City the night before. Items had gotten pushed back, items had gotten jumbled around. So they waited, and as they waited, they played hangman, heads huddled together. Fuck this shit was Naima's secret phrase, which Chela easily solved before Stickman hung. Let's get high, was Chela's offering. Lollies stumped them. Poopity, whoopity, flushity, weshity, plop, plop, plop. Chela had whispered slowly as the puzzle finally revealed itself. What's with you and shit? She said, shaking her head. They'd played on, snickering and snorting like middle school malcriadas, and when the mayor arrived with face flushed, he flashed them ojo from his seat at the dais, making them shake even harder with silent laughter, eyes streaming. Today, they had come to the meeting to hear the city attorney update the council on the status of investigations into what Sizemar knew about the cost discrepancy and when they knew it. And so they are caught off guard by the 20 or 30 people who file up the chamber aisle to excoriate the city for voting the previous week to sharply increase their electric rates. A rate hike? Last week? Naima gasps. Did y'all hear anything about a 15% rate hike they passed last week? Nah, says Chela. Says Lali. Naima leans forward to fold her arms on the seat in front of her, chin resting on top, as the elder members of Vamos approach the podium one by one. Damn, that's some serious shit in this weather. Oye, mama, I'm trying to hear what he's saying, says Chela. The old man at the podium, flanked by a squadron of viejitas, looks worn and disheveled in a rumpled suit that swims on his slight frame, but his voice is firm and practiced. City power and light, he is saying. The utility, that is supposed to belong to the city, to the people, had the nerve to approach you behind everyone's back for a rate increase? You trust their CEO on this after all the sneaking around on the Sizemore project last fall? What's more, you borrowed a trick from their playbook and actually gave it to them behind everyone's back. And bills are already rising. Just think back to last winter, last summer. We can't even keep our houses livable when it's cold or when it's hot. Meanwhile, big companies like Sizemore and the developers of those smokestack condos are getting tax breaks and fee waivers left and right from the city, while our homes fall apart from not having the money to fix them. At the very least, you should have waited until you were out of your legal mess. At the bare minimum, you should have had CPL release a line item budget showing what they want all that money for. But we are not asking for the bare minimum. We're telling you no. No rate hike. No means no. And if we have to, we'll recall it. Behind him, the Villaquitas cheer. Chela stands and emits a wolf whistle. Ah, Chela, mumbles Naima, embarrassed but proud. You want to get us kicked out of here? Chela ignores her. We got to connect with those folks. Who, Manuel Martinez? That old brown beret? Naima clucks her tongue. He's okay, I guess, if you like being elbowed out of the way so he can jump in front of the mic. Everyone knows it's the women in Vamos who do all the work. I know, says Chela impatiently. Still, that shit's for real. We gotta support. So go and ask him to marry you already, says Naima. Watch me, Chela retorts, bounding off to the corner of the chambers where Vamos has gathered to debrief. With the council now broken for lunch, the crowd has dispersed into small standing clusters of conversation. As they squirm in their seats waiting for Chela to return, Lali gazes out over the council chambers. There's dumb old Henry Fart, everyone called him, probably even the council, who speaks to every single agenda item at every single council meeting. There are the sharks in suits, with their dreams of converting the power plants of yore into the oxygen bars and doggy daycares of tomorrow, idling around for their pet zoning case. There's Butch Keller, giving a Heil Hitler greeting to the city manager from across the room. And there is the slate of reporters from the city paper standing shoulder to shoulder at the back, looking bored. Where is Chela now? She's moved away from Manuel Martinez and also stands at the back, talking with that Volt reporter, feeling him out for what he knows undoubtedly. But a pang of something uneasy, wanted but unwanted, runs through Lali. She wants him to look over, to notice her and wave goodbye. Jesus, why? As they file out of the chamber, Chela jabbering excitedly about her discoveries, Lali thinks about turning to wave. But she doesn't, willing that her retreat be an entreat, an invitation. And thank you. And then I'm going to read one more excerpt that is kind of the culmination or the fullest expression of the love story part of the book. It's from a chapter called Sludge Ponds and Sacred Dances. Highest summer. Lali and Joel do weird things together. In the weeks of hopeful calm, descending after Vamos submits its tens of thousands of signatures for the city people to certify. Lines and lines of signature, shaky and blocky and flowing on reams of legal paper nested in cardboard file boxes. There's nothing to do now but wait, Lali pushing the pending move from her mind, pretending it isn't happening. It is a window of time outside of time that has opened up, in which to imagine that something else is possible, some radically new or unpredicted outcome. The morning Vamos had hauled all those boxes of signatures to the city clerk's office downtown, Joel had swung by on his way out of town to pick up his daughter for the summer, and he and Lali had sat together on her porch under a mid-morning sun just low enough to be tolerable. There, he had confirmed receipt of the poem. He had approved its minutes and certified the results. So close to my experience, there's virtually nothing I could add, he said. All morning, Chela had texted and texted for Lali to come to the city offices. Where was she? She was supposed to be there. She was supposed to speak. But Lali has not slept all night, not 1 hour. How could she speak or do anything else normal or stable? That was the day when Hector got home from work that she told him she was sure she could not stay. That day of the submission of signatures, 3 weeks before their scheduled move. Now Joel's 11-year-old daughter has arrived for the summer with hair long and straight and eyes clear as the skies of the Panhandle Plains where she stays most of the year with her mother. She is as quiet and watchful as Joel and Lali are buzzy and jumping, shocking each other each time their hands brush, each time feet bump beneath the table. They are cautious otherwise, scrupulous in avoiding intentional contact. Because of daughters, because they don't know what might happen. So they eat dinner together, Joel and Jody on one side of Joel's dining nook, and Lali and Nena on the other. After, when Lali stands doing the dishes at the sink, Joel retrieves an Ayurvedic nutritional supplement from the fridge to show her, various herbs suspended in a tar-like honey sludge. Chayawanprash, he pronounces slowly. He digs out a large spoonful for himself and eats it in a single go, then spoons out a smaller amount for Lali to try, urging it to her lips as she stands at the sink with hands submerged. Lali hesitates, embarrassed, then parts her lips to permit his offer, so full of tenderness and erotic charge. No one has ever fed her before, since childhood at least. In the other room, daughters eat ice cream and bang on Jody's electric keyboard. For those slender few weeks, they comprise a mythical family, the fiction of a family for any onlooker. They do weird things together. Lali knows a place they can all go, she and Joel and the kids and even Luce. It's outdoorsy, family friendly. The shape of a nature park finagled from the city's former wastewater lagoons. At one time, the end of the line for its sewage, the sinkhole into which they had poured its entire watershed. Lali knows about it because a chapter of her dissertation had been about the complex urban politics of wastewater management, evident in battles over what to do with Los Angeles sewage sludge. The actual ecological embeddedness revealed by desires to displace human embodiment from consciousness. No, really, it'll be interesting. Come on. So they drive early to beat the day's pending swelter to the far south side of the city, to the simmering biological funk that remains where water once went to die. It's not nasty anymore, Lali reassures a still apprehensive Jody as they spill out of the car to sniff cautiously at the air and inspect informational kiosks. They had to clean up the site after the Clean Water Act passed, and they had to do something else with the sewage sludge. They couldn't just dump it like they used to. Now they treated some of it for use as fertilizer and landfilled the rest. Took them a while, Joel says. Clean Water Act was when, 1970? Yeah, says Lali. Most cities had to be dragged backwards screaming into compliance in the late 80s or 90s, especially in Texas. And San Antonio was kind of late to the sanitation party generally. No sewers till the turn of the 20th century, and really the west side didn't see them till the 1950s. Signs kind of gloss over that part. She runs a finger lightly over the kiosk's engraved letters describing the city's commitment to sustainability, its partnership with the bird people who now administer the park. Sewage ponds, she knew, were famous for their ability to attract birds, and consequently the bird people who chased after them in their floppy hats and binoculars. They circle the ponds once, lazily. Jody walks briskly ahead by herself, arms crossed, Luce trotting after. Nena lags and has to be persuaded, then pulled, then carried. But not by Joel, only Mama. Flies seek their bare arms when they stop momentarily to observe the minor goings-on of the ponds. They see the boxy snout of a reptile snuffling above the waterline, slipping below its green surface before they can tell if it is turtle or snake. Probably turtle. They pass a docent on his morning beat, binoculars raised as he gazes out over the ponds and stop to say hello. Did you see that vermilion flycatcher? He wants to know. He's doing a summer bird count, tally sheet in his hand like a golfing scorecard. In fact, Lali had a red streak of something flying overhead a moment ago, although she hadn't known the name for what she was seeing. The docent nods approval, giving her a look that's part satisfaction and part pride. Good eye, he says. It is a real birding moment. A moment of birding subterfuge, passing for bird people, with their camera bags and backpacks and water bottles bumping against their bodies as they walk. The birds are sparse that morning because of the summer heat, the docent had said. But they do see egrets gliding overhead in a pair. Those Joel knows. Then skimming the water with legs thrust backward to light with precision in just the right spot on a constructed island where other egrets gather. As they land, the others jump aside to admit them and then ease back in, absorbing them into the group as a pool absorbs the wrinkle of a wave. They see a knot of 15 to 20 ducks swimming in whirlpool formation, furiously churning the water. Why? Lolly wants to know. But Joel doesn't know. And farther down on the banks, they find a scattering of feathers, outlining what can only be recent carnage. And beyond that lies a ball of feathers, perfectly spherical and light as air. Amazed, they pick it up to examine more closely, holding it to the sun like a gem. Joel cradles it in the palm of one hand to phone photograph it with the other. Its colors remind them of tiger's eye and its patterning of leopard print, iridescent brown with black modeling. What is it? Maybe an owl pellet or a savage chunk of flesh? But there's nothing inside to suggest something so gruesome, something, or no bones or gristle or meat. Nothing in their experience that can lend insight or explanation. Just the intimation of a previous violence, and the single precious remainder, just orphaned feathers tightly curled into a ball to guard their mystery. Weird stuff, synchronicities and inexplicable resonances like a tuning fork humming. Their next outing is a black hat dance performed by an exiled Tibetan Lama who travels the world to spread awareness of the orphanage he heads in India for refugee children. Watching the dance is supposed to remove all negative energy, all barriers to hope, all obstacles and delusions, preventing one from seeing things as they actually are. Nina is with Hector that night, so Lali has a few hours. She's nervous when Joel arrives with Luz in his bright red car. So indelibly bright, her head will forevermore turn at the sight of red on the road, even 2 states away, in case it is him. Quiet nervous, not sure if the thing between them will start up, whatever it is. What if it doesn't? Nervous as they park and walk inside the intake building of the homeless mega shelter where the Lama will perform his dance, in an interdenominational chapel hidden somewhere inside its fortress of services. Joel senses her tension, stopping to hug her before they enter the building. Are you scared? He asks. A little, she admits. Don't be scared, he says, smiling into her with arms wrapped round. It'll be okay. And like that, it starts up between them, the frequency that cannot be named. Thank you. Thank you. I know it's hard to listen for a long time, so I appreciate your attention. Let's see, where are we? Oh, cool. So now we're going to open it up to Q&A, and I'm going to turn the moderation of that over to Mobi. So if you've posted questions up above in the chat, or if you want to post questions now, she'll collect all of that and help me do some Q&A.
So I don't see any questions so far. If I've missed one, someone type it in again. But there's all kinds of comments of how moved people are by the reading, and many compliments for what a great reader you are. Oh, here's a question from Jean Hackett. Are you working on another book?
Oh my gosh, no, not yet. I feel like I have to, I knew that getting this book out was going to take a lot of energy. And so I'm just giving myself fully to that process for the next couple months at least. But I do have a lot of ideas for what I want to work on next, which I'm hoping are shorter things. I have a couple of like ideas that I'm like, oh, it would be great if those were shorter pieces and not a huge like 400-page novel. but yeah, so I have a young adult fiction idea about like a non-binary or a trans kid coming of age in the middle of the AIDS epidemic. That would be kind of like reworking of an earlier story that I wrote when I was much younger. I have a very satirical utopian science fiction story idea that I'm calling Planet of the Bonobos, which will be hopefully a very funny, but also, well, yeah, mostly funny take on. Um, this is going to sound like weird when I say it, but on the Trump years, um, which weren't funny at all. That's why the story will be really funny. Um, and then, but my big kind of project, like the next big book that I want to write, would be the story of my grandmother, which I think I want to write as historical fiction. She has a really interesting um, story to her life that I think probably requires a lot of genealogical research. But basically, we think that her father was a Jewish refugee around the turn of the century to Mexico, and then later he came north into San Antonio. And so there's this sort of like there's a story on the one hand, and she like kept that secret. We didn't learn about that until after she had passed. And so um, on the one hand, it's an interesting person to kind of try to imagine like what that story was for her on a personal level, but then also kind of looking at the hidden but intertwined like histories of Jewish and Mexican immigration and how they came together in this particular individual. So that's kind of like that's my long answer to your question, Jean. Thank you.
Oh, fascinating. We do have some more questions. D. Lockwood wants to know, when did you start or decide that this was a story in this form?
I started working on this in like January of 2011, maybe a little earlier, but I think I was pretty sure from the start that it was all once, like it kind of came out as fragments first. I was just writing these little fragments of things, and then like, but pretty early in the process, once I put those fragments onto note cards and then started moving the note cards around, I started realizing that it was one story and that it was really big. Um, and I realized later that that's what I was doing with storyboarding, but I didn't know that at the time. It just was a process that kind of made sense. But yeah, I didn't know it was going to come out in a kind of like, if I guess by your question, if you mean when did I know that it was going to take kind of like the shape that it did, like as a multi-genre kind of book. Like I didn't really plan that. It just some pieces of it just came out, as poems or as reporting or as scholarly notes. And then from there, it kind of made sense. Okay, well, maybe there could be a character who is a playwright, or maybe there could be a character who's a scholar or a character who's a journalist, right? And so that allowed me to have different kinds of writing, like in the same book, which is really fun.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a question that has a very quick answer, and then a couple last questions that may be a little bit more involved. So the quick one is, are there copies of the book that you wrote while pregnant available for purchase?
Yes, there are, David. I have about 10 copies that I can make into books, and I would love to get one of those to you. So just I'll send you an email, or you send me an email or a text or something.
And I don't know if you can see Molly's question. So it says, what was your emotion on what appears that life imitated your art?
I think like everyone else, I was totally like weirded out and freaked out. But I also, I also knew from the process of writing the book, I remember the moment when I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna have to, because I'm posing these questions of like, what would it look like if the city were to suddenly decide to do something about climate change, given the way that they've tended to address problems in the past? What would that look like? Since I knew I was asking that question, I knew I'd have to know something about like, well, what would be the likeliest climate scenarios to unfold here, that the city might have to respond to. And so like I knew that I was going to have to read certain things. I knew I was going to have to understand like what are the like public health literature on heat waves, or the history of blackouts, or like how does ERCOT work, or like how do they decide when to do a rolling blackout, and how do they just, who gets it and who doesn't, and how have other cities, when there have been rolling blackouts, like what does that look like? So I knew, so in that respect, like it wasn't that weird, because all of that research that I did was only possible because all of this stuff was already happening, right? And like that freeze was based on a freeze that happened in 2011. So it wasn't a prediction so much as like documentation of what has already been going on. But that being said, it still was weird. Because it wasn't just the freeze that happened. Like there was also news shortly before the freeze of like a rare earth mineral processing plant that wants to locate in Hondo, Texas, which is just outside of San Antonio to the west. And so like that actually like really weirded me out even more maybe. And then the freeze hit, and that was just like, I don't know. It was, yeah, like it was weird, and then it was, well, it's not that weird, and then it was weird again.
I think you just answered Sister Elizabeth's question as well, where she says, how do you explain that the storyline and events are mirroring current events? Are you psychic or just highly intuitive? And I think you've given us some answer there. Yeah. Another quick one. Have you done acting on stage? Because it looks like you should.
I haven't. Oh, actually, when I was in middle school, I was really into this one UIL event, which is basically like oratory, because you weren't supposed to act, like you weren't supposed, in fact, you were, if you used your hands in any way, like you'd get points off. You were just supposed to stand there and you had your reading, and then you would like orate this piece. I was really into that, but I have never done.
We did a play together, Marisol.
Yeah.
You were on stage for my play. That was your poem.
That's true, but that was just poetry. But no,
it's funny that you couldn't use your hands, because I always think it's one of the beautiful things about your reading is how you use your hands. I mean, your hand becomes the egret. Your hand becomes what you're reading. Okay, there are a couple more questions. Do we have time for more questions? You want to? So this is from D. Lockwood, a tricky question for Marisol and also for Edward as publisher. The book and settings and everything is very Sananto. And is it tricky to figure out how much is too insider and how much is just natural color, sense of place?
I think one of the ways I hear that question is like, how do you decide what you fictionalize and what you don't? Is that kind of what you're asking? Like, and I think all I can say is that the book just came out the way it came out. And as it was doing the things that it wanted to do, I would stop and think like, is anybody going to be interested in this book outside of activists in San Antonio? I don't know. Or, like, should I really fictionalize this character or this non-character, or should they appear in the book the way they are as a public figure? But I kind of just let the book do what it wanted to do. And then was later reassured when people who don't live here told me, oh no, I could relate, or, I got feedback later that told me it was okay, that it was so deeply about this place.
And the last question that I can see comes from your publisher. Marisol, what kind of legs do you wish for this book? That's
Oh,
from Edward.
good question. Gosh. I would hope that, I guess I would hope that a lot of different kinds of readers pick it up. I think there's a lot of different elements to it. I would hope, I mean, like my nearest and dearest like wish next to my heart is like that activists will pick it up and read it, and sort of like reflect on and see themselves reflected in the work, and see their questions and see the problematics of that work reflected, and feel understood or feel that I've captured that or raised important questions. But I also would want to see like people that have never done any kind of activism read it and just appreciate it as a story. Like my hope is that the politics of it aside, I want people to feel like it's a page turner. Like I want them um, to enjoy the characters, to enjoy the writing, like to feel moved by the writing. So anybody that, I would want anybody to be able to pick, and not everybody's, like all books, not everybody's gonna like, but I would hope that people could appreciate it both for like the specificity of it, but also like the universality and the craft of it, like as a piece of writing and as a story. Sister.
There is one last question, if we have time.
Sure.
And that's it. Can you see your book or parts of it on stage being acted out?
I never thought about, well, actually, I must have given some thought to it because it has a freaking play in the middle of it. And the play was actually based on a street teatro that we did, like in real life. So maybe I could.
First, I want to thank you, Marisol, for a wonderful reading. It was great. Got to listen to you read in person. It's wonderful. It's always great to listen to the author read, and all your friends and people that support you, family and friends from Paraguay. Hello there, Arlo. Thank you for joining us. Mobi, thank you very much for being here. Kamala Platt, thank you. David Zamora Casas, wonderful artwork. It's beautiful. Thank you. Loved it. Vic, awesome. Thank you for being here also. And Vinny, I saw him here earlier. So tell him I said, what's up? Give my doppelganger there a big hug for me. And everyone else, family and friends, thank you very much. So let's get this wheel going. And again, Joe, thank you for being there and getting this rolling. So here we go. It's even got music. Okay, it says we have a winner, and the winner is LJ. Who's LJ?
Reveal yourself. Do they have email addresses like when they sign in? Oh, cool.
Okay. All right. Let's do one more just for fun. Um Vic.
Vic.
Awesome. All right. So send me your information and then we'll get some stuff out to y'all. Again, thank you very much. Thank you for spending your Friday night. It's Friday, right?
It's Friday.
your Friday night with us. And again, congratulations, Marisol, for your prize, for your winning the Sergio Troncoso Book Award with the Texas Institute of Letters. That's amazing. And to see more of what we're doing with FlowerSong Press, you can go to flowersongpress.com and check out more of what we're doing. And you can buy her book there and more of our authors' books there. Thank you. Appreciate you. And I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you, everybody.